Hello and welcome to another episode of the Openhearted Podcast. My name's Will Wheeler and I'm joined with my main man, Photon John. What's going on, brother?
Hey man, there's no dance today.
No dance. Hey, just a heads up, man. You're making a lot of noise.
Making a lot of noise.
So when you talk, it's
Is that better?
No.
Okay.
It's not. Sorry, brother.
That's all right.
Not a real good way to start the show, but now we can't hear you at all, my friend. Not sure what's going on there. Go.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's heaps better, man.
Great.
Is that good?
This thing was $300 and it never works.
Oh my god, I have the exact same, but
Yeah.
I don't know why it doesn't work, man. Maybe it could be your headphones, or I'm not sure, man.
I don't know. Anyway,
Who knows? How's your week been anyway, mate?
Oh yeah, I guess spirit of the podcast. I'll be honest and say a bit rough, but getting through it.
You're doing okay?
Yeah, I'm getting pretty good and proactive at managing rough days and stuff these days. So.
I think that's the thing. I think the beauty of it is you're open about it, and I think when we can speak about our mental health and how we're feeling and all that type of stuff, I think it doesn't make it better, but it can ease that sort of tension that you're sort of going through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Anyway, we really got to get down to business right now because we've got a really awesome guest with us today. So today we're going to be joined by Zoe-Jane Littlewood. I'll bring her up on the stage. Zoe, thank you so much for joining us. Let's get this show on the road. How are you today?
Sounds great. Hey, good morning from people in the UK. Good evening to everyone in Australia. I am good. Thank you for asking. I am
not a problem.
Doing great.
Nice. So, the cool thing that we really wanted to speak more about this year is we wanted to talk a bit more about dyslexia. We wanted to talk about a whole range of cool out there topics. And, I see you doing some really cool stuff out there, out around the whole social media world. And I'm sure you're doing other stuff outside of that. So, when I saw you, I was like, yeah, we've got to get Zoe on the podcast here because she looks like she's doing some amazing stuff. And, I think it's fitting to be able to talk a bit more about young adults living with dyslexia. What do you reckon?
Definitely. A topic that isn't actually spoken about as much as you would think. There's not enough of people who are young like me talking about dyslexia, and it's a shame. I'd love to see more people talking about it, but we've got to start somewhere. So if I can be someone that helps to make that change, then I'm gonna take that mission on board.
Just while you're there, Martin's a big follower of us, a fellow dude from the UK there. So Martin, thank you so much for reaching out, my man. It's always good to hear from you. So it's always good to hear from a fellow I don't know how you would put it, I don't know, person from the UK. I was going to say I don't know if there's some slang term for it, but before we get stuck into it today, I think we'll do a little bit of housekeeping here. So if you're listening and you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow our social media platforms. Like we said, we will have our podcasting platforms ready shortly as well. So if you can get onto our social media platforms, it'd be really awesome because you'll be able to get some more updated information there as well. So, Photon John, how you feeling, brother?
I'm ready to go, man.
You born ready, mate? Let's get stuck into this, eh? All right, cool. So, Zoe, you said a little bit about before how, there isn't a lot of people talking about this stuff, especially with young adults. I think the biggest thing I found when I started to, really set my foot into the dyslexia space and all that we're hearing a lot about, kids reading, stuff like that. And where really it's so much more complex than that. And I'm sure I don't need to convince you as to why. But, I think it's really important before we start here is to, if you're able to share a little bit about your journey and why you've really stepped into this advocacy role. It's a hard word for me to say, but you know what?
Definitely. So, you know what? This whole advocacy journey was never really going to be an advocacy journey, if I'm honest. It was more of a personal, reflective kind of, I want to know what it is. I've been labeled as dyslexic for a very, very long time. I was fortunate to kind of know in year 6. So that's out here. That's when you're like 11, 12-ish. But I didn't get fully diagnosed until university like most people. So I've always known I was dyslexic, but it was literally, Zoe, you are dyslexic. And Bob's your uncle. There was nothing else to it.
So at school, for example, like, how is that for you?
Interesting is what I would say. Very frustrating because I couldn't do what my friends were doing. I'm a very chatty, bubbly person, and I just wanted to be good at something. I would put so much time and effort into trying to be good for it to never work. Like, school did not like me the way I used to like school. Fun fact, well, it's not even a fun fact, but towards the end, I really didn't like school. But there was a point in life where I wanted to be liked by school and the schooling system because I enjoyed it. I wanted to enjoy it. But I guess it's like rejection. When you get rejected so many times, you kind of just give up, don't you? And that was school.
Can I say, right, like, I know when I was back in school, right, and I know where you're coming from in regards to, you wanted to like school and all that. I used to like, not hate, but I really wanted to sometimes just get a good report sometimes. Were you ever the same? Like, you just knew that, especially when you'd see people always talking about what they got in their spelling test or whatever test they had. And I was always thinking, I'm never going to get this. At least once I just wanted that. Did you ever go through similar type of stuff?
Definitely. Like, only time I ever did get good reports was sports. That was the only thing I excelled in. But everything else, I kid you not, especially when it came to spelling, when they'd bring over the sheets of paper and they'd put it face down, I wouldn't even bother lifting it. I would, like, I already know this is not going to be what I want, so let me not bother. And it is hard when you've got everyone asking, oh, what did you get? What did you get? And they ask me because outside of lessons, I taught for England. I love talking with everyone, and I'm just that person. So for me to go from being really loud and bubbly outside of class to quiet inside, they'd be really confused. So of course they're constantly asking me what I've got, and I would look at them like, I don't want to tell you what I've got because it's bad. It's embarrassing. But I couldn't quite explain to them because they didn't know what dyslexia was. I didn't know what dyslexia was. I was just seen as the bright person when talking, but not so much on paper. And I was like, thanks, guys. You're right, but thanks, guys.
And it's confusing, isn't it? Because I think, and I'm sure you've probably gone through the same as this, is that when you say you got your friends asking, hey, what score did you get, for example, right? And you're building up this anxiety of having to share that you've only got 1 out of 10 or whatever it is, right? You do feel stupid, you know what I mean? But then in your head, you feel very intelligent and you're thinking, I'm not a stupid person at all. And then when you go out to the running track or sports or whatever like that, you're blitzing it and you're thinking, man, I'm in my element. And it's just such a weird feeling.
Yeah. And it's annoying because the teachers did not grasp that. They'd constantly say, well, Zoe, when you speak, you're amazing, you're bright, you're intelligent. When you're right, you're not so great. But then when you go to sports, you're smashing it. Why can you not connect the dots? I'm like, why can you not help me to connect the dots? Because I can't do it alone. I don't know what was missing. Like, in school, it didn't make sense to me. I couldn't tell you why I was good at some things and not others. And it's super embarrassing. And you're right, that mental anguish that you go through, that negative self-talk was in school, it was bad. it was bad. Like, I'm always such a bubbly person, but deep down, I had so much hatred towards the schooling system towards the end. To the point where I was never a rude child. I was always just very talkative. So my report was like, Zoe talks way too much. I get it. But it got to the point where in the end, I was just looking at teachers like, I do not like you because you are not helping me. Therefore, I am not going to give any effort in this class, which it did make school towards the end a little bit difficult because I wouldn't say on my best behavior, but I wasn't trying, and I wasn't going to do anything that would make the teacher's life easier, because in my head, they're not making my life any easier, or at least put me on the same level playing field as everyone else.
I think the biggest thing, and it's interesting that you say this, is that when I got towards the end of high school, and I'm assuming you're probably the exact same, I just gave up. You know, it's like punching someone getting punched in the stomach constantly, right? And by the end, you're just drained.
You've got
Do
no
you know
energy.
what I mean? Yeah,
You've
you
got
don't.
no energy for anything.
And I think the biggest thing is sometimes we find that, and I'm assuming you're probably the same, there probably was times where you really did try, right? And you got the exact same
this is what I mean. Like,
yeah.
You would have heard as well. Just keep trying. You just need to try a bit harder. Keep pushing. And I'm like, do you not see? I'm already pushing 10 times harder than everyone else. Like, I get you're trying to be encouraging, but I'm pushing and still getting the same bad results. It's going to get to a point where I'm like, okay, well, I was just destined to have these results. Like, when you say it is like getting punched constantly, like nothing is changing in my situation, to the point where I would go through phases. I'd give up, I'd try again, give up, try again. But in the end, I was just there like, cool, school wasn't for me. Let me just stick to sports and sports alone. I never went back to languages, geography, nothing. I stuck to what I knew because I didn't feel supported. And if I'm honest, towards the end, I didn't feel like I was clever enough to do those topics anyway.
It's unfortunately a little sad. It seems to be a recurring theme that comes up in episodes when we talk to people, that the school system just is not equipped to teach people in different ways. It's fit the template or fail, basically. I had a similar thing with, being forced to socialize at school, through certain things, but I could not do it. I was terrified to do it. I don't think the teachers understood, how terrified I was to, do line dancing or something like that, where I'd have to touch people and but it was that or fail, and they were just like, well, this is the curriculum, so you're going to do it. There was no.
The system's definitely set up in a way where it is beneficial for certain people, but not everyone, because that is very true.
And it's interesting, right? Because I think the biggest thing I found, and that's probably not when I was in school, and even it took me years to get this, is that you feel, especially in school and once you leave school and all that, you feel so alone. You think, I know for myself, I felt that I was the only one who had dyslexia, right? And I'd see other kids and I'd think no one else is struggling. And it's really interesting now, being so open about it, how many people have come out of the woodwork and gone, yeah, man, I was dyslexic. Yeah, I didn't know that, or stuff like that. But do you know what is really interesting, right? Is that one of the things I was speaking to some, because I'm in education now myself, right? And I do a whole bunch of stuff, and my goal is to really adapt to neurodistinct people and everything. And I think the biggest thing is that when I go and teach a lot of people, especially who are neurodistinct, we're afraid to ask questions a lot of the time. And when I think back to it, in school, if you asked a question because you didn't understand, a lot of the time the teacher would be angry at you and say, oh, you're not listening and all that. So, I think a big thing, especially when we're thinking about school and all that, it's so crucial and can do so much damage to a young person that can affect them for life if if they don't find that correct path and everything. Did you find that was a bit of an issue for yourself, especially
Mine.
finishing then going to uni?
So my experience was slightly different to that, but I'll walk you through it. So school, yes, was the exact same. I put my hand up, Miss, I don't get it. Well, Zoe, listen. And I'm like, well, I am listening. You're obviously not listening. I'm like, but I am. That honestly was the dialect that we had most of the time. Or Zoe, stop daydreaming. The only reason why I went to daydreaming and like looking out the windows because I can't connect with the lesson. I don't get what's going on. And if I put my hand up and say I don't get it, and then get told, well, that's my fault for not listening, it's like, but I am. I've given you my undivided attention and I still don't get it. However, when I went to university, I think because I was doing a sports course and it was something I was passionate about, I was that kid in the university lecture putting my hand up, answering everything, even if it was wrong, because I developed this confidence about me where I didn't care what anyone else thought. If I said it wrong, if I said the answer incorrectly, I was like, it's a learning curve, right? You want to get it wrong here and not in the exam. That I think was only possible due to it being something I was passionate about. I enjoyed sports and wanted to know everything. So I didn't mind looking quote unquote stupid if that was going to benefit me. Like if I knew I got the answer wrong then, I would remember in the exam, oh, Zoe, remember it's not that, it's this. So my university life was slightly different in a sense, but I didn't feel the bottom of the class because it was so practical. If anything, I sat there thinking like, okay, I've got this. Like, this is fine. I can do it. The written stuff, not so well, but practically and like in lessons, I never felt that same feeling I did in secondary school.
Yeah, interesting. And what was it that, so, you said before that you really it wasn't until university that you got diagnosed. What was I suppose the turning point that made you go, you know what, something's not right here. I've known something's not been right for a while. Why then,
So I've known since year 6. So my mum wouldn't mind me saying this, she's dyslexic as well. So she knew the symptoms straight away, but her dyslexia is a lot more severe than mine. So she knew, but didn't quite know how to get the support. But the changing point purely was, I knew as soon as I got to university, I would get more support. I knew I could get the university to pay for my full dyslexia test, because obviously a clinical psychologist or an educational psychologist has to be the one to do it. So for me, it wasn't necessarily a turning point. I just knew this was going to give me what I needed in a way that I could afford it, because the tests are super expensive here in the UK. I think it's expensive everywhere you go.
It is.
For me, I needed to have that written in paper that I was dyslexic to prove that I actually was. And I guess this is something we'll talk about later, but because it's an invisible disability or an invisible condition, people don't think it's there. Sometimes you will try and trick yourself to say it's not there. And realistically, I do things differently. It is fact. It happens. So to just have something written saying, Zoe, you are dyslexic, I was like, cool. That weight was lifted, although I've known for ages, it was lifted. And it's sad out here in the UK that university is the place where that help does start to come. But imagine if you're someone who doesn't want to go to university, because out here we're pushing more traineeships and apprenticeships. If you're not going to uni, you miss out on that support.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because here in Australia, we don't get that. We don't get, like, if you go to a university and say, hey, I'm dyslexic, I'm 100% sure they're not going to put you through a dyslexia test.
So it's a government, I guess it's a government scheme. So when you go to university, you can apply for student allowance, which will help you out if you need money for like rent and like buying stuff. But there's also a separate disability student allowance. So if you've got any sort of neurodivergent conditions or any other disabilities, you can apply for that. Within that, it will fund you to get that diagnostic test. So that's one thing the UK is doing well. Granted, the support that comes after that still isn't great, but at least we're being funded to get that initial, you are dyslexic, which not
everyone. It's a lot more than a lot of other people are getting. And yeah, it is. It's, a big thing that I'm finding here in Australia, and this is where we can compare the two different countries, because there are some countries who I would say doing it well, and the UK would be one of them. But like you said, there's probably room for improvement. so here, for example, I've spoken to universities about how can we help these people get more help. And look, don't get me wrong, they are putting certain supports in there and everything, but some people are just not coping with those supports. Now, a lot of the time, the people that they're getting support from within the universities aren't properly trained people in dyslexia or ADHD or autism or whatever that is, right? A lot of the time, they're just volunteer students who are giving them links to websites where they're able to get some information. But once again, if I sent you an email with 20 different links about resources to read to find out about your dyslexia, you're not going to read that. You know what I mean?
I struggle. If you're sending me an email with loads of links, I'm already an upward facing battle. There's too much for me to look at. I'll get confused. As soon as I click the link and I see there's a whole web page of reading, I'm going to have to read that so many different times for it to sit in. Like, that's crazy that that's the route that they go. Because like I said, we do get support. So I went through this support system. I got equipment. I got a software for my laptop that does all the good stuff, the reading, the covering. Like, I use an overlay. I know not all dyslexic people do, but I do because it helps out. That came with, I didn't pay for any of that. And then I got tuition. So I had one-to-one tuition every Tuesday. Granted, bless this woman's soul, she was amazing, but knew nothing about dyslexia. So our first kind of like couple months was me teaching her what I kind of knew would be the best way to teach me, if that makes sense, which was a learning curve for both of us. But you would think, and now this is where I'm saying, okay, the UK compared to what Australia is doing at the minute, definitely in terms of supporting universities is better. But this is where I'm like, to make it even better, pair us with people who know what dyslexia is and could support us more. She was amazing because she did English literature, which was perfect for all my assignments because she knew that good stuff. But it would have been so much more helpful for me if someone just understood me to start off with.
Yeah, and that's sort of why I'm building which company am I speaking about? That's why I'm building the Neurodiversity Academy, because we want to have it that we've got a college where people can come and be taught by other neurodistinct people who actually understand them, because it does, or it doesn't even have to be other neurodistinct people, but people who have training in those areas and are able to understand exactly what happens, because like you said, you could be really good at something, but if you don't understand how we do things, there's still going to be a bit of an uphill battle there.
Yeah, which there was, but I was so thankful for her support, and bless her, she did take the time to learn more about it. But I do agree, it doesn't have to necessarily be someone who shares the same condition, but just someone that gets it, that has had the training, because that is the biggest issue, I think, everywhere. There's not enough people who are trained in the field of neurodivergency.
Yeah, no, and you're dead right. And I think a big thing, especially, say, hanging out with Kevin and a lot of other people I know in the neurodiversity space, just being around those people, I've learned a hell of a lot more about autism, or, I didn't even know I was ADHD until last year, so learning so much. But it's really interesting. And Kev, I'm sure you probably hear a lot of similarities in regards to your education type of pathway and everything. Am I right?
Yeah, a lot of similar challenges despite the difference in neurodiversities. But also, I would say the dyslexic side of things, even just this chat so far, I'm understanding that better than I ever have. Yeah.
Well, keep listening.
And I think I'm probably a good example of someone who maybe doesn't know a lot about it, who needs to learn more. Or it's a good example of where society's kind of at with it, I would guess, because I'm even in the neurodiversity field, and you have both just explained this so beautifully that I actually feel like I get it.
I think once you put two dyslexic people together and you listen to the story, For someone who's not dyslexic, it really shines a light. Like when I'm talking to a fellow dyslexic person, or to be honest, any neurodivergent person, but specifically for me, when I speak to another dyslexic person, it makes sense. To someone else, they could be speaking gibberish, but for me, it just makes sense. It's like there's a brainwave where I just understand it. And I feel like when you listen to two dyslexic people speak, you start to understand more about what dyslexia is. To just add, before I forget it, because I know if I don't say stuff, I'll forget it. Will, you mentioned the support that you get from like the rest of the community. That for me was a massive step in my journey. When I first started, I had no idea what neurodiversity was. I only knew dyslexia. And I don't know if you'll remember this or not, Will, but I actually messaged you. You was one of the very first people I messaged asking, can you explain what neurodiversity is? Because I have no idea. I'm dyslexic. I thought dyslexia was just the term. And I remember reaching out to you and you gave me so much helpful advice. Like our community it's such a good place to go if you need some support. And I thought I wanted to mention that because I messaged you, I messaged so many other people that I still speak to this day and be like, you know what, you guys actually helped me out on my journey. You may not think it, but when you ask and you receive support, it's like, okay, people are actually willing to listen and help out.
And I think the biggest thing behind that is that it's like I've been there, done that type of thing. And I think, but don't get me wrong. You will meet some people in the neurodiversity community who won't do anything for you.
Yes,
But it's like anything, right? But I think a big thing is that we know what it's like. We know what it's, and I think a little bit can go a long way. And I think the biggest thing is and don't get me wrong, I have had to get to a point where I've learned that I can't always help everyone, because when you've got so many people reaching out to you, like I used to get a lot of university students want to interview me about certain things. Now I'm sort of like, that's time. So there's a lot of little things. But the big thing, the way I look at it a lot of the time is that you don't know what people are going to turn out like. You could become like the Prime Minister of the UK one day. Who knows? Okay.
I'm going to be real with you. With our politics at the minute, I might as well. So who knows?
Yes, true. And, well, I suppose, we're looking at America. Donald Trump got voted in one time. Seems like anyone over there could become a politician. You know what I mean? But what we might do, we might move on because, like you said at the beginning, when you first got into this space, you didn't even really, advocacy wasn't, your number one thing. You weren't like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. And it sort of turned out to that. Now, what are you currently doing? We see a lot of stuff that you're doing. It'd be great to hear what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, who you're sort of mingling with. What's happening?
So you're right, like you says, it all was a personal thing that I then decided to just document. So I created an Instagram page where I would just put information out, like it just start with like informational posts, like what is dyslexia, some tips, some facts. That moved on to creating some videos. Now I talk a lot. I love talking. It's my passion. I love to rant as well. So I do like little rant videos when days aren't too great, because on my platform, there's a lot of positivity, which is great. I'm all for positivity. However, you need to be realistic that not every single day is a great day, especially when you have dyslexia. There's days for me where I'm literally attempting to do work and it's not working and I'm just frustrated. And it's still, although I understand the condition a lot more, it still frustrates me that I can't do certain things at times. So I really try to put out real and authentic posts, whether it be in video form. And that led me to doing not necessarily a podcast, but like an Instagram live that I do bi-weekly, where I discuss different topics and what it's like being dyslexic in my 20s, whether it be what university was like, what was school like, socializing, which is a big thing. I love socializing, but I'll go home at the end of the day knackered. I will not speak when I go home. because I've got no energy, because the amount of energy I use just trying to focus on someone when they're talking, especially if it's like a busy area, I get really stimulated easily. So I really
Have
try
you
to
been
focus.
tested for ADHD at all?
No, but all my ADHD friends are like, Zoe, there's something else there. And I'm like, probably because I bounce off the walls.
Reason why I say this is that with dyslexia and a lot of other neurotypes, a lot of the time they do have a buddy. So, for example, me, I'm dyslexic and ADHD. Some people might be dyslexic and autistic. Some people might be dyslexic, autistic, and ADHD, and so forth. So that it's sounding a lot like that could be the case, because I get like that too.
It does make sense because, like you says, it all interlinks. A lot of our conditions, we will have traits of other things. Some of the traits relate to loads of different things, but I do get ADHD a lot, and that's what I do with my content. I like to just be very real and open about it. I do the exact same on LinkedIn because I don't see people that look like me doing it often. When I first got into the space, there was a lot of older people who were white, who had lived their life. I didn't see many people that looked like me. I didn't see any young mixed race women talking about what their experiences are like. And I was like, well, that's strange. I wonder why. Like, I understand the stigmas that come with it now, but I wanted to just break that. I was like, you know what, if no one's going to do it, I'm going to do it, because even if it benefits one person, someone's going to come across the content and be like, oh, I'm like that. Because just like you, I dead ass thought I was the only person with dyslexia growing up. None of my friends were dyslexic. No one in my area was dyslexic. University, in my whole year, like course with all the people I was with, there was only 2 of us who were dyslexic. The other dude just was like, it didn't really affect him too much. Like, he had his own ways of dealing with it, would be the best way to put it. So I still felt really lonely because there was no one I could talk to and rant about, like, why I couldn't do this and that. Now I still rant, but I appreciate the positives that come with being dyslexic because there's so many of them. But the main reason for doing what I do is because I don't see people doing what I do in my particular representation. But people do talk about dyslexia a lot more now, which is great. And like he says, when I talk to older people, the wise words do help, but it's also quite sad to see that our experiences are still very similar.
So you're from Birmingham, right?
That's correct.
What is there much of a dyslexic community in Birmingham, out of curiosity?
No, it's really hard. I'll be real with you. That is one of the things I've struggled with. I network with so many people here in the UK, and I did try to start up a little series where I spoke to people in Birmingham who were dyslexic or were experts. Birmingham people don't really talk. We're very prideful people, and it's been really hard to find out if someone's dyslexic or not. Again, age plays a massive role in this. As me, as a young person wanting to come in some people's circles, I kind of get looked down upon, like, you're still young, like, why are you trying to mingle with us? Or they can't see how we could relate. So I've struggled to make a community in Birmingham who are dyslexic, and that's one of the challenges that I face. Like, I can talk to anyone. I love talking. I'd never stop, as you can tell, but Birmingham has, and it's really sad because this is my hometown. I am a Brummie. We call ourselves Brummies.
Brummies?
Brummies, yeah. So I'm a Brummie girl through and through.
Yeah.
I have to talk to Londoners and people from Manchester because no one in my city talks, and it's upsetting. I would love for more Brummie people to come out.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I can definitely see that. Moving on from this, you've spoken about, some of the challenges that you've faced, all that. What are some of the challenges that, young dyslexic adults face?
Not knowing what it is one of the biggest challenges. Like, you go through, like I said, the schooling system. If you don't go to university, it's even harder. You have no idea what it is or where you can go to seek that help. It makes a bit more sense when you've gone through the educational system, but when you're out of it, where do you go? Like, you can't rock up to a uni that you don't go to and say, oh, I think I'm dyslexic. And I think one of the other challenges that we face is in the work environment. So this isn't personally from me, but what I do see is already going into the workspace as a young person can be difficult. Our generation is different. We want to work our way up, but we don't want to do it as long. Like realistically, I want to be a CEO in the next 5 years. I want to try loads of different industries, not just one. And this thinking is different to the older generation. And I find when I go into organizations sometimes, and I know it's the same for other young people, when I say this, people just look at me like, well, that's not going to happen. Like, no, you need to stay in an organization for 10, 15 years and work your way up. I get that used to be the case, but that's not what I want to do. Like, I want to take the world as the oyster. I want to try everything until I find what it is that I'm like, yeah, this is me. And that idea is sometimes looked down upon from the older generation. So that's something that young people face. And then sprinkle on the extra added topping that you're dyslexic. It's like they always assume it's just you can't read and you can't write and you can't spell. I'm like, mate, it's more than just that.
It's more than that.
It's definitely more. But all of these things combined make it a really uphill facing battle when I try to say, as a young person, I want to be seen as someone who can be higher up. I could be a manager. I don't just have to be a deliverer. I can be a manager. I can be a CEO. I've done the first step in founding a dyslexics page. What's not to stop me from becoming a board member or something? But sometimes when I talk about this to people, they just give me the side eye, like, "Girl, are you for real? Like, you're 24." I'm like, and why is age an issue? If I have all the experience and I've got the confidence, why can I not take these positions?
Totally. And I think, sorry, Kev, you go, mate.
No, I was just saying, yeah, cool.
Oh, okay, cool. But you're actually right. I think this day and age that we can become these big CEOs of. Well, how old was Mark Zuckerberg when he became CEO of Facebook?
A teenager, wasn't he?
He was a teenager, wasn't he?
He was really young, yeah.
And I think this is the thing that we're seeing, that people are able to, and I think the traditional way of, like you were saying before, of having to stay in a company for 15, 30, 20 years or whatever like that, right? That's not the norm anymore, because honestly, if I see someone who's been in a company for a very long time, it almost makes me think, well, what's wrong? Do you know what I mean? It's a different.
I know we get comfortable, but you need to push yourself out the comfort zone. As scary as it can be, especially when you've worked in this industry for so long and you're stable in it. But surely you want a taste of something else. Like, just put yourself out there again. It's as scary as it can be, but I do agree when people tell me they've been in something for so long. I'm like, oh wow. Nothing to say that that's not bad, but.
Well, when Will and I would have been quite young, I don't know what it was like elsewhere, but here in Australia, it was really frowned upon if you were someone who did job hop. And people would, you need to just settle down and find your place and spend the rest of your life there. And we'd be like, no, thank you. I'm not really into that idea.
But it's true. But like
years later, we end up with our own businesses,
Well, yeah, and I think that's the thing, there could be those routes that if you want to build that, you can. Don't get me wrong, owning your own business is hard. It is really difficult. But I think, going out and trialing different things, stuff like that, you learn. You learn probably so much more than what you could from a book or watching someone. And this is where, Kevin and myself, we have other projects that we work on outside of what we're doing, because it's like, if we were to do, well, it's a little bit different for ourselves because we work, own our own businesses and all that. But if we wanted to do certain things within a company, someone else's company, I should say, you're limited. You can't say, hey, I want to do this and I want to do that. So sometimes you have to make your own journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's perfectly okay. And I think people can do that these days.
Yeah, I mean, what you say is true. It's very hard to run a business, but it can be a really good option for the people who have the fortitude to do it, who are neurodiverse, because you create the workflow, you create the product, the service, and you can do everything in a way that does work for you. And there's so many strengths that can come out of your neurodiversity that give you a unique offering, So
that's why I think we like trying different things. I'm someone who I can't sit still to save my life. I've always got to be doing something, and I learn best hands on. So when I'm thrown into different situations and I'm doing it, it makes so much more sense than just reading it from a textbook. That's why sometimes I like to try different industries, because I like talking, I like problem solving, and you can do these in so many different ways. I like talking about what I'm passionate about. I like learning things. I like having uncomfortable conversations so we can get comfortable with them, but also understanding someone else's point of view, because my point of view don't match someone else's all the time, but these conversations are what's key to developing and growing as a person. So like you said, like there's nothing wrong with trialing and having different experiences, because we're young enough to do it.
It's funny that you say that, right? Because one of the things, and I'm the exact same as you, and it's probably because I'm pretty sure you're ADHD and you're dyslexic, so we probably think alike, right? But with me, I love and Kevin would know this, I love putting an idea out there and trying to build off that idea. Maybe that idea won't work, who knows? But at least we've been able to look at it, talk about it, research it, and maybe even trial it. But what I find, especially within a working environment, not my own business, is that I might put an idea, then everyone does their best to shut down that idea as to why it can't be done. And it's like, okay, but you haven't even tried it. You haven't even looked at it. And then we end back up at square one again. You know what I mean?
That was exactly my experience. Was I was working for search engine optimization companies, and I worked for all the big agencies around town. And I could just, because I just see things differently, especially when it comes to data and spreadsheets. I can just see patterns and stuff that other people can't. So I'm coming up with all these ideas, and it just wouldn't make sense to them. And they would just like, well, no, this is the way we do things. So this is the way we do things.
So frustrating.
And there's a better way to do it. And then as soon as I went off and started my own company, every client just, kicked ass right away, and has ever since. So I'm glad. It was a good way to get out.
It's mad how we can all relate to that, because I've had the exact same thing. It's just even more frustrating that once the ideal, everyone's like shut it down, everyone's like simmer for a couple months, and when someone else says it, I'm like, that's basically my idea, but it's okay when this person says it, but when I want to come out the woodworks and say it, you shut it down. And it's like, why? Like you said, you haven't even explored it or even given me the option to formulate something that I can present to show to you why I think this is going to work. It's just shut down from the get-go. We're not trying this. And it's like, you're the ones that are disadvantaged. That's not even a word.
Disadvantaged.
There we go. You're doing that to yourself. I can give you something that you don't see. I look at things from a bigger picture. I don't get stuck in the narrow-minded view. So that is very valuable in some aspects. Let me do what I'm good at. Like, just open your mind a little bit to what I could give you, if that makes sense. And some people don't.
Yeah, look, I've definitely been in that experience a lot. And you know what? When I do stuff with other companies, because I still need to do that while building my business and all that, I just sit back now. I don't even get frustrated by it, because I'm like, you know what? This isn't even my business. It's not the way I would do it. And I see so many other people doing it. And I just think, oh, well, for me personally, I can't wait until I have teams of people who have these fantastic ideas. I'm going to go, okay, go off and try it. Let's see what happens. That's what I'm all about, because that's where innovation builds, and if we keep shooting that down and and you know what's really pissed me off, if anything, right? I feel that some people haven't even learned from the COVID period. they're just going back to like how they used to do things, and I'm like, you guys are a pack of idiots.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
So much that's come from that. Like, I'm very thankful that where I work, they have taken that on board, which is great. We have flexible working, and this. Well, then again, I never worked full time until this. Like, I started working properly kind of during COVID, so I've never really known the norm before of always being in an office. So for me, I love this flexible working. But I
Sorry, can
understand
I
that
ask what job you do? Sorry.
so I work. It's a bit of an awkward one to explain. So I work for this sports development organization, or charity, I should say. And my role, I work specifically with year 11s to provide a summer program where we teach them the skills that they need. We do like rock climbing, zip ropes, high ropes, all of that good stuff, balancing it with social action, problem solving, public skills, as well as finance, to give them a better footing for when they go to university or the real life world of work. But it just revolves around me doing a lot of public speaking to young people and just being honest with them. That's how what I do works, is when you're just honest with them. I'm not going to change my accent. I'm not going to belittle you. If I'm annoyed, I'm going to tell you I'm annoyed in a professional way, so you know to take me serious, but that I'm going to listen to you as a young adult that you are. That is what I do for work on the, like, yeah, that's what I do.
Sounds like a perfect job for you.
It's going well. It's good. It has its challenges like every other job, but I get to talk a lot. So any job that lets me talk normally is a good job.
So is that like, are there certain elements of that job where your dyslexia helps you excel at it?
Yeah. Storytelling. I love talking, and I have to do assemblies and I have to connect with year 11. So year 11s are 15 to 16-year-olds, and they're at a time in their life where they want to be taken seriously. But when you're in school, it doesn't happen. Like, it's just how the school's set up. And when I come in and I just speak to them unfiltered, professionally, but unfiltered, they listen to me more. Like, I can go in being authentic. And I even said at the beginning of my PowerPoints, I'm dyslexic, so if I say a word wrong or something don't make sense, it is normal. Just go with it and bring it up to me after, because I like to correct my mistakes. And just being honest with them. But storytelling for me and being a good communicator are some of the key strengths that dyslexia has given me. And like I said, the problem solving of it all, and just being open-minded. I have times when my slides don't work. I'm like, cool, guys, this is going to be a roller coaster of a ride, but bear with me. And they relate to you so much more because you're showing I'm not this prime perfect person that some teachers make me like seem to be. Like, when you have guests coming into the school, you all have to be in your best behavior because they're going to be the best of the best. I'm just me. I make mistakes. I say things wrong. It is fine. So those, like, being dyslexic really helps me in that sense. Like, I just love talking to people and getting that communication and that story across, because you don't have to do the program. It's always your choice. But I can tell them what it's like because I've done the program, and I share my honest opinion, stuff I like, stuff I don't like, because you won't know what you like until you do it.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah, I could see myself really getting engaged with what you're saying if I was a student at school. Out of interest, and I think we sort of spoke about a little bit at uni, but what support is out there for younger dyslexic adults? Because, I think the thing is as well is that, it's not just about people who are going to uni, but what about the people who don't have the scores to get into uni or are lost? Because we can be quite lost once we finish school.
It's a difficult one. So I won't really talk about the school one because we have spoke about the school. Before I go to people that don't go to university, I think it's easy if I break down what it is if you're going to work. So this, sadly, I think only applies to the UK. So if we have any UK listeners, this is for you. The UK government have a scheme called Access to Work. So as a dyslexic person, I could tell my worker that if you have the confidence to do it and you feel comfortable that I am dyslexic and I need XYZ to help me work, the government will fund, or will basically pay the employer for them to get my software, for them to get a dictaphone if I need that, as well as coaching and mentoring. So here in the UK, that is something you can definitely utilize. Only downside to that is there's always a downside. It can be a very tedious and long process, which makes you have less faith in the whole government because it's very long and there's a lot of people that should have access to it that don't. But that is definitely something.
Is this due to like red tape and stuff like that, like filling out forms and stuff like that?
There is a lot. Like, these people should understand the strengths and weaknesses that neurodivergent people face, yet their application processes is the bane of someone's life. It's paperwork after paperwork after paperwork, and there's no support to do that paperwork. But
it's almost like the NDIS here, right, Kevin?
Yeah. We just got that in the last however many years. It's not a very old thing. Unfortunately, we don't have the situation that England does, where both sides of politics are really supportive of funding the national health system. But we did finally get it rammed through, and it's getting a bit better. My sister's in permanent NDIS housing. And my mum is about to get on it. I could get on it, but I kind of don't feel like I need it. Don't want to take the money.
I feel like we are slowly getting, and every country can learn from each other because there's good and bad bits, but we are slowly getting in the right direction. I would love for it to go a bit faster, but it is what it is. So that's some of the support you can get. If you're someone who's not in education, you're not in work, it does get a bit trickier. You can always rely on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. There's so much support. There's so many people there that you can reach out and you can gain a lot of information. Because for me, you need to educate yourself. Like, it's amazing if there's people there to help you, but you get such a sense of purpose when you do that education yourself. Like, I would have loved for someone to kind of hold my hand and help me, but I'm a stronger person knowing that I did all of that by myself, and it adds to me as a person. But for people who don't know, you can start by accessing that and learning a bit more about what dyslexia is if you think you could be, or ADHD. Then here in the UK, they suggest you go to your doctors. I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't have that much knowledge on it, but they normally recommend, if you think you could be ADHD or dyslexic, you need to go to your doctors first to see if they can then put the steps in place for you to then get the next part of the access. But that's when the waters become very muggy here in the UK, because they will then try and refer you back to someone else, and then it's just a circle of not going anywhere.
Well, I think it's a little bit sort of muddy here as well, because especially with women, for example, with ADHD, a lot of the time it's being what's the word I'm looking for? Shrugged off. Yeah, or even shrugged off before then, you know. No, you it's more this than that. Do you know what I mean? And I've known some females to have pretty much gone back to their doctor, or gone to, I think I read something not long ago where this one woman, it took her 9 times before she was diagnosed with ADHD.
I would not be surprised. We always get told, oh, you're very sensitive, you overreact. Like, they can give us 1,001 reasons as to why we may not be ADHD. There is an element of masking that women do, but even still, you're right. It's a lot harder for some women to actually get that diagnosis, and then to constantly have to go back and forth with the doctors. It's like, none of it's helpful, because some people just give up and they're like, you know, it doesn't matter now, when realistically you're entitled to that. Never stop fighting for it, because I genuinely think it helps people once you know for sure, but it's a very tedious process.
Yeah, crazy. I think we were going to go over something, what do you think is lacking in terms of support, but we've sort of really covered that. But, you know, I think the biggest thing when Kevin and I were like getting like these questions ready, and we're like, you know, what about some parents, you know, because I think for a parent as well, especially who may be learning about their child's dyslexia, especially when they're journeying through school through to high school and then leaving high school, that can be a really challenging part, and very you know, it could be probably very scary for some parents as well, because they don't know what their child's future looks like. Where do you reckon some parents could go? Kevin, is that your joint again, mate, with the sirens?
That's me there. That's me.
Oh, is that you today? Okay,
it's
interesting.
It's on traffic now, so is probably struggling to get through. But yeah, sirens.
Okay. Sorry, before I go on, I gotta admit, whenever I would like call my mum from like the UK, there would always be sirens going off all the time. So
They're busy people.
yeah, totally. Sorry. Just before I do go on to that, we did have one person there who I'm not sure who it was. It's just come up LinkedIn user. It was extremely tedious and a strong support system is needed. I'm assuming that's probably
that's
based on
to work.
Yeah.
Tedious process. That's how I know straight away that person's talking about access to work, because for those that go through it, it's very, very tedious. But I guess to answer your question on support for parents, always, again, educate yourself. LinkedIn, I think for parents, to be honest, Facebook groups are probably one of the best places for you to go. Now, take some things with a pinch of salt, because Facebook is where everyone talks. But when I was trying to build a brand and learn more, I did go into Facebook groups and learn a lot of valuable stuff, because there's a lot of moms and dads and parents and guardians that go through the same challenges and stresses as you, that could actually give you support. And sometimes they accept it more and it's relatable more from another parent as opposed to someone like me that has no kids, that can't really, I don't know the stresses of being a parent. So I really think utilize and look into what Facebook groups are there is a very good first place to start. Then also schools. Now, you may have to fight this one. I'll be totally honest with you, because my mom had to fight. But schools technically should be the very first point of call parents can go to seek that next step and that advice. And I say it from a personal point of view that it is tedious and it can be very stressful. But as a parent, keep pushing, because if you can kind of nip it in the bud at a younger age and get it all moving, that will benefit them so much more as they get older. I'm very thankful that my mom fought very, very hard to get at least screening done, because they wouldn't even screen me. Like, screening is not the diagnosis. That's just to say, oh yeah, you've got the signs. And it was the screening that I had all the way up until university. It was like official, but even that was enough to let me know something wasn't right. I'd still get frustrated, but I knew it was something. And I think having that has made my process not as hard as other dyslexic people. It's still hard in my own right, but it's still a little bit different because I've always known there was something. So those are the supports I definitely say. But school, you'll have to push them, but they technically are the place where you should be able to receive the information.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It is interesting. You know, I think a big thing going on from the, say, Facebook groups and all that type of stuff, yes, in regards to that, but also to, I think, probably one of the biggest knowledgeable people or community, I should say, is actually other people who, like we spoke about before, who are your neurotype or something like that, who are in that community. Because I think what I've found with some of, say, the Facebook groups, for example, there may be some parents on there who may not be dyslexic themselves or something like that. So sometimes the information they've got is just hand-me-down information that they've gotten from someone else that isn't technically right a lot of the time. And like we spoke about before, I think the best people I've learned from is other people within the community. And I think once you do get into the community somehow, you start to find out where the good resources come from.
Definitely.
You know, because so you go, Kev.
I know for myself, and I didn't get diagnosed until, I don't know, 15 years later, but when I first sort of it became apparent to doctors and stuff that I was autistic, there's a website called wrongplanet.net, and I've been on there ever since. And it's just autistic people speaking to autistic people on a proper, like, old school message board forum kind of thing.
Wow.
But that was so eye-opening, and so, like, I finally felt sort of at home. So yeah, I don't know if there's a website like that for dyslexic people.
I don't know. I normally just go to LinkedIn, but it'd be very cool if there was a website. you do learn so much more from someone who is a fellow dyslexic person that's been through the experience, because a lot of our experiences tend to be similar. They'll have their own nuances and their own little flares, but the nitty-gritty stuff does tend to be very similar.
Totally. And I think a big thing for myself is even though I am, dyslexic and ADHD, myself personally, I always like to have the evidence backing what I'm saying a lot of the time. And I think that does come down to when you're out in a bigger field type of thing, sometimes, and I think this is a thing as well, we are all so different. You're different to me, I'm different to Kevin. So my experience could be completely different to your experience. So maybe the stuff that I'm sharing and saying, hey, this will work, may not work for others, which could damage people if we're not given the right information. So I think this is where connecting with the right people who have that evidence to be able to support what you're saying is correct. So this is where a big thing for me is I'm connected with a lot of world leading doctors who I could go to and say, hey, I was speaking about this and someone said this, but I didn't agree with it. Am I right? And they're able to go, well, actually, this is that. What you said was right. Things like that. And I think that's so much better than someone who just doesn't have that information.
But this is also why I always stress representation, because our experiences, like you said, my experience and your experience, very similar but very different. As a woman of color, as a young woman, I have other experiences that happen that add on to the dyslexia that you will never be able to relate to. So it's one of those ones where that's why I think representation is so key. That's why I do what I do, because my experience of dyslexia could be very similar to majority of people when we look at like the signs and like a few of the things I struggle with. But then you have that added on pressure of being a young woman, being a mixed race woman. Like this is then that extra layer that someone else could relate to. Same with you, someone who's from Australia could relate to you a little bit better than me, because I don't know what Australia's like, nor about the support, which I briefly have learned a bit more about today, that there's not really as much support. Because I'll be honest, I complain about the UK a lot because I could see it being so much better. But then it's so easy to take a step back and be like, oh, Australia, I'm sorry. Let me give you some support.
We look jealously at you and your health system.
But it's crazy because, again, it kind of off topic, but it just goes down to how we sometimes here in the UK can be a little bit sheltered from the rest of the world. And it happens in all different places. Like, these things happen, but our struggles may not be someone else's struggles. It doesn't mean it takes away from it, but it's good to be a bit more open-minded, because yes, I complain, but I actually had a lot more resources than someone in America that's my age at the minute, potentially.
It's funny how you say what you just said. You hit the nail on the head really well there. Our struggles can be so much different, but that doesn't mean we still didn't. I'm just wording it in a different way, that we still didn't struggle, because a lot of people see me, for example, very confident, public speaking, going, I do a lot of stuff out there, right? And I've had people message me saying, you wouldn't know what it's like to struggle, and to hear that it doesn't make me cry, but it pisses me off, because I have struggled. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, maybe I have been able to succeed, but that doesn't mean that I haven't felt pain at certain times, right? And I think this is where, okay, we may be there might be people who will never get to my level, okay? But that doesn't mean that I still haven't struggled like them. Do you know what I mean? Everyone is unique, and I think you've really got to take on everyone's certain situation, regardless of.
I'm with you there, 100. I hope
you know what I mean?
that it's just lucky, it's not luck because I put so much hard work into it. Like,
tell me about it.
It's very easy for someone to say, oh yeah, you're lucky, you're fortunate. I can kind of get where you're coming from, because you're looking at me being this high person on this pedestal, when what you don't see is all of that failure to get there, because you don't succeed in one, like you have to fail. Like, it's just the way it is. You fail to get better, but people don't see it. And that's why, like, I make, like he says, I say, my struggle may not be your struggle, but I've struggled, and it doesn't take away from any of our struggles. Like, irrelevant, like yours could be a lot more, but that doesn't mean I didn't struggle. Like, here in the UK, we have our own set of problems and issues. Compare that to Africa, nowhere near the same, but it's a struggle nonetheless. But I just think it's important that we mention, like he says, you have struggled to get to where you are. You may be at a very good place, but you was never at that place.
Yeah,
totally.
It took me. You know, I get on a stage regularly in front of hundreds of people and, you know, sing my ass off. But and people look at that and go, how can you do that? Being autistic? Well, it took years of hard work and crappy bands and not being very good to eventually get to a place where we were good and I was confident and could do it.
But do you know what? Do you know what I heard? And I didn't even know this. I don't know. I don't know if the evidence backs this or what. So I'm only going off what I've seen. I heard that Eminem is autistic.
I strongly suspect it.
Yeah, and when like I sort of read into it, I was sort of like, when you've sort of watched interviews with him and certain things, like I think he had a really big break from performing and everything, because and for years he was like addicted to lots of different drugs and all that, probably to cope with everything that was working against him. You know, but it makes sense, I suppose. But like I said, that's just what I've heard. I don't know if it's true.
But you know, yeah, I mean, it speaks to the point though. Like, everyone is different, even within your neurodiversity is going to have a different thing. And you've also got to be, the other thing is there's a lot of pop psychology happening on social media at the moment. Just people sort of saying things as though there were facts to do with neurodiversity that they don't know to be true, that aren't evidence-based. And that can be a little dangerous too. So you got to sort of figure out the line between recognizing differences and what's personal to people, but also not just in terms of the information that you give other people, but in terms of what you believe personally about dyslexia or autism.
Yeah, because you mentioned, like, when you go and sing and that you have to rehearse, you practice. It's the exact same with dyslexia. When I public speak, people see me doing like, oh yeah, she's good. You know how much practice that takes me? I sit and I practice and I practice and I practice. And the first couple of times I did it, I said my name wrong. How do you say your name wrong, knowing that you've said your name for how many years? It was a word fart. I said the name wrong, and I looked at my manager and it happened. I was like, did I just say my name wrong? But you practice, and I still get nervous every time I go up. It's the same bag of nerves, but you start and then you get into it and it's all good and it's gold and it works pretty well after. But it just goes to show we practice what we preach. Like, before I can do something, I practice, I make sure I know all the relevant information, because that helps me. That's how I get good at something. It's not just luck, it's not just talent. It's hard practice. I try my hardest to practice, so then when I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing, I'm good at it. But also that just helps me as a dyslexic person. I love to practice everything and know what's happening. I don't like the not knowns. I need to know everything. Like, I will schedule out my day, and if something doesn't happen, I'm like, did that happen? Like, it's very strange. We're getting better with it, but
funny. Cool. Well, look, you know, I think we might pull it up there, you know, because I think we could keep talking about this topic for a long time.
Well, we should.
We definitely should. I don't think my wife would be too happy, because I know she's got some veggies ready for me in the oven. So I will be in deep trouble if I kept on going. But Zoe, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We love what you are doing. You are such an awesome person. So thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it. All the work you're doing over in the UK is awesome. And keep being a Brummie. Is it a Brummie?
Yes, there we go.
Yeah,
that is
got that. Is it a Brummie or Brummie?
It depends on if you want to say the accent. A Brummie is normally how people say it. Brummie.
Brummie or Brummie. Okay, I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
Brummie.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. For anyone who is listening, please subscribe, like, and follow to our social media pages. It really helps everything that we're doing in regards to the podcast. Photon John, you have anything else you want to say, brother?
Just thanks, Zoe, for everything. And be sure to go and follow Zoe on socials. What would those be?
Yeah. Well, do you have some social media pages where people can find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Instagram on the it's been a long morning already. The Dyslexic Movement. And then on LinkedIn, it's just my name, so Zoe-Jane Littlewood.
Cool. You are awesome. Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you, everyone who's been listening today. My name's Will Wheeler, joined by my main man, Photon John. This is the Openhearted Podcast. Thank you very much. Until next time.